The year is 1348. Somewhere in the mud-slicked heart of rural France, the air inside a peasant's stone hovel is thick enough to choke you. It's a suffocating cocktail of burning tallow, unwashed wool, and the metallic tang of blood. On a bed of lice-infested straw, a woman is screaming, not just from the agony of a 3-day labor, but from the realization that this room is likely her tomb. In the 14th century, pregnancy wasn't a journey. It was a biological death sentence. 1 in every 3 women will not live to see their children reach adulthood, and the very hands meant to save you are covered in the filth of the stables. This is a world where science is replaced by superstition, where a misplaced shadow is more feared than a dirty blade, and where the miracle of birth is a brutal gamble against infection, hemorrhage, and a mounting darkness that's about to sweep across Europe. We'll use AI reconstructions to bring this world into focus. If you think you're prepared for the reality of the medieval womb, look closer, because in this century, the most dangerous place on Earth was a birthing stool. The sickle hits the frozen earth with a dull thud as Catherine collapses, her fingers clawing into the gray French mud. Around her, the harvest doesn't stop. Time is a luxury the hungry cannot afford. She is 3 months into her 3rd pregnancy, but in 1340, there are no soft announcements or gentle celebrations. There is only the sudden, violent realization that her body is no longer her own. As she gasps for air, the bitter wind of the Loire Valley whipping through her thin linen tunic, she knows the rules have changed. Quick check-in. Comment your location and local time, and subscribe for more cinematic history. You might imagine a pregnant woman in the past being pampered or protected, but the reality is a relentless grind of physical labor that would break a modern athlete. To the medieval mind, a quickening in the womb didn't earn you a seat by the fire. It simply meant you had to work harder to feed an extra mouth that might never breathe. Survival starts with the test. In a world without plastic sticks or chemical reagents, your first hint of life comes from a piss prophet. You watch as a village elder holds a jar of your morning urine up to the weak winter sun, peering at the sediment like a fortune teller reading tea leaves. The logistics are as primitive as they are bizarre. Sometimes they'll tell you to sow grains of barley and wheat in your waist. If the barley grows first, it's a boy. If the wheat sprouts, a girl. If nothing grows, the seed inside you is considered dead or cursed. This isn't just harmless folklore. These diagnoses determine how the community treats you. If the seed is deemed weak, you are fed a diet of warming foods, heavy spiced ales and salted meats that often do more to dehydrate and sicken you than nourish the fetus. But the lack of prenatal care is only the first hurdle in a long, escalating hazard stack. You are currently living in a period of the Great Famine's lingering shadow. Your bones are likely soft from a lack of vitamin D, your pelvis narrowed by childhood malnutrition. This skeletal reality is a ticking time bomb. As the fetus grows, it isn't just taking your nutrients. It is physically struggling to fit through a birth canal warped by years of eating nothing but pottage and rye bread, tainted with ergot fungus. You feel a constant, dull ache in your lower back, a warning sign that your frame may not be wide enough for what's coming. Yet, you cannot rest. You must haul water from the communal well, slopping the heavy wooden buckets against your bruising thighs, unaware that the water is teeming with parasites that will soon turn your morning sickness into a life-threatening bout of dysentery. The worst part isn't the work, though. It's the invisible psychological cage. The church teaches that the pain you feel is the debt of Eve, a divine punishment for original sin. To seek a way to dull the pain is to defy God himself. You are told that if you crave a certain food and don't get it, your child will be born with a physical mark of that food on their skin. If you see a person with a limp, your child will be born lame. You walk the village with your eyes downcast, terrified that a single glance at something unclean will deform the life inside you. You are already being blamed for catastrophes that haven't happened yet. But as the months pass and your belly swells beneath your rough wool apron, a new fear begins to eclipse the superstition. Rumors are drifting up from the south. A great mortality is moving through the ports of Marseille, a sickness that turns the skin black and the lungs to liquid. And you are about to find out that being pregnant makes you the perfect target. The previous month's rumors have turned into a cold, hard reality. The great mortality is no longer a distant whisper, but a shadow lengthening over the French countryside. But for you, trapped in the 7th month of pregnancy, the plague is a secondary ghost. Your primary battle is with the invisible forces that the village priest calls demons and the midwife calls bad humors. By the end of this part, you'll know why a simple piece of jewelry was considered more life-saving than any medicine. You are now entering the phase of the hazard stack, where your environment becomes an active predator. Your skin is permanently mapped by the bites of fleas and bedbugs that live in the thatch of your roof, their itch a constant, maddening hum. In the 14th century, there is no nursery. You sleep on a pallet of straw that has been soaked with the spilled ale and sweat of a dozen seasons. The logistics of staying clean are a nightmare of medieval physics. You don't wash your body, not in the way we understand it. Water is seen as a vessel for disease that opens the pores to miasma. Instead, you perform dry scrubbing with a piece of coarse linen, which does little more than move the grime around and irritate your sensitive, stretching skin. Your primary defense against the mounting discomfort is the amulet. You wear a heavy, wax-sealed pouch around your neck containing a mixture of dried rue, peony seeds, and perhaps a scrap of parchment with a Latin prayer you cannot read. To you, this isn't decoration, it is a medical device. If the pouch feels heavy, it means it's absorbing the evil eye. If it breaks, you believe the baby's soul is forfeit. But the real danger isn't spiritual, it's nutritional. You are suffering from pica, an intense craving for non-food items like chalk or charcoal, a desperate signal from your body that you are severely mineral deficient. In a world where the winter stores are dwindling, you are forced to eat famine bread, a gritty gray loaf made from ground acorns, peas, and sawdust. The grit wears down your teeth and creates a constant state of agonizing constipation, which, in your advanced state, puts dangerous pressure on your pelvic floor. You are weak, dizzy, and your heart races at the slightest exertion. Then, the new threat emerges. A sudden, localized swelling in your ankles and hands. To a modern doctor, this is preeclampsia, a precursor to fatal seizures. To your neighbors, it's a sign that you have too much blood and your humors are out of balance. The payoff for this diagnosis is a treatment that might kill you before the labor even starts. They bring in a man with a small rusted tin of leeches. You watch in a daze as he attaches the slimy black parasites to your swollen ankles, believing that by draining your life force, he is lightening your burden. You feel the cold slip of the leeches, the slow trickle of blood that won't stop because your diet lacks the nutrients to help it clot. You are being drained of the very strength you'll need for the most violent experience of your life. And as the sun sets over the village, the first real contraction ripples through your core. But it's 2 months too early. The leeches have left your skin bruised and weeping, but the dull ache in your lower back has sharpened into a rhythmic, terrifying pulse. You are only in your 8th month, yet the great mortality has turned the village into a landscape of mourning, and the stress has triggered a premature descent. By the end of this part, you'll understand how the very architecture of a medieval home was designed to trap you in a lethal environment. As you move from the fields to the interior of your stone hovel, the temperature drops 10 degrees, but the air grows thick with the stench of stagnant life. This is the first level of the hazard stack, the environment. The logistics of a medieval birthing chamber are a masterclass in unintentional biological warfare. There is no ventilation. Following the medical theory of miasma, the midwife insists on sealing every crack in the door and hanging heavy, soot-stained blankets over the windows. She believes that a draft could kill you. In reality, she is creating a perfect incubator for bacteria. The only light comes from a flickering tallow candle made of rendered animal fat, which fills the room with a greasy, yellow smoke that coats your lungs. You are instructed to lie on a birthing bed of fresh straw, but fresh is a relative term. This straw was harvested from a field fertilized with human night soil and has been sitting in a damp corner where the household pig occasionally sleeps. As the contractions intensify, you are denied water. The prevailing belief is that cold liquids will chill the womb and stop the labor. Instead, you are given caudle, a thick, lukewarm mixture of curdled milk, acidic wine, and raw egg yolks. It's supposed to give you strength, but in your nauseated state, it's a struggle to keep down. Every time you gag, the pressure in your abdomen spikes, a searing reminder that your body is a battleground. You look around the room and see the tools being prepared. There are no sterilized linens or silver blades. There is a wooden birthing stool, stained with the fluids of a dozen previous labors, and never once scrubbed with anything stronger than a damp rag. There is a basin of holy water that has been sitting out for days, growing a thin film of dust. The new threat isn't the pain, however, it's the helpers. In the 14th century, birth is a communal event, and the small room is now packed with local women. They bring with them the filth of their own homes, their hands unwashed after tending to sick children or butchering livestock. They begin to prepare you by rubbing your belly with hog's lard mixed with crushed lilies, believing it will make the baby slide out. The grease traps the soot from the air against your skin, creating a black paste. You are sweating, shivering, and trapped in a crowd of bodies, while the midwife begins her first internal examination. She doesn't wash her hands, she simply wipes them on her apron. The same apron she used to wipe the nose of a plague-stricken child an hour ago. You feel her rough, calloused fingers enter you, and for the first time, the fear of the mortality outside is eclipsed by the agonizing fire spreading within. But as the midwife's face pales, you realize she's found something she didn't expect. The midwife's fingers withdraw, slick with a mixture of lard and something darker. She doesn't speak, but the sudden silence in the room is louder than a scream. The new threat has a name, a malpresentation. The baby isn't positioned head down, it's sideways, a transverse lie, or perhaps a foot is reaching for the world before the crown. By the end of this part, you'll know the brutal physical reality of why turning the child was often a death warrant for both. In the 14th century, there are no surgical theaters, only the logistics of the hand. Without the ability to see inside the womb, the midwife must rely entirely on her sense of touch, navigating a blind, wet cavern of muscle and bone. She calls for the Great Potion. This is a concoction of ergot, a fungus that grows on damp rye, mixed with vinegar. While modern medicine uses purified ergot derivatives to control bleeding, the medieval version is a wild gamble. Too little does nothing. Too much causes violent, tetanic contractions that can literally rupture your uterine wall. You swallow the bitter, metallic liquid, and within minutes, the rhythm of your labor changes. It's no longer a wave. It's a crushing, unrelenting vice. You are placed on the birthing stool, a crescent-shaped chair designed to let gravity do the work. Your arms are hooked over the shoulders of two god sibs, women who hold you upright as your body tries to turn itself inside out. The money shot of medieval obstetrics is a procedure called the podalic version. Since the baby is stuck, the midwife must reach deep inside you, up to her elbow, to find the feet and pull them down. There is no anesthesia. There is only a leather strap for you to bite on so you don't shatter your own teeth. You feel the raw, agonizing friction of her unwashed skin against your internal tissues. Every movement introduces thousands of bacteria from the stable muck and the plague air directly into your bloodstream. The pain is so white-hot it becomes a sound, a high, thin whistling in your ears that drowns out the prayers being chanted by the priest at the door. But the midwife is struggling. The baby's shoulder is wedged against your pubic bone, a condition known as shoulder dystocia. In 1348, there is no maneuver to fix this gently. She begins to use mechanical force. She pulls with the weight of her entire body, her boots slipping on the blood-slicked straw floor. You hear a sickening pop, the sound of a fetal clavicle snapping, or perhaps your own pelvis fracturing under the stress. This is the payoff of medieval survival. Even if the baby is delivered, the damage to your internal structure is often permanent, leading to fistulas that will leave you incontinent and an outcast for the rest of your short life. Just as the child's head finally clears the birth canal, the door to the hovel bursts open. The village beadle stands there, his face masked in a vinegar-soaked rag. He isn't there to congratulate you. He's there to announce that the mortality has claimed the priest, and the house is to be boarded up. The baby's first cry is thin, a fragile needle of sound that pierces the heavy, stagnant air. But there is no joy in the midwife's eyes. As the beadle hammers a wooden cross onto your door from the outside, the midpoint re-hook of your survival story begins. It is no longer just about birth. It is about the intersection of new life and the literal end of the world. By the end of this part, you'll understand how the Black Death didn't just kill the sick. Nursed in the shadows of the womb, it hunted the most vulnerable. You are trapped in a boarded-up room with a newborn, a pile of blood-soaked straw, and the realization that the priest who just blessed you died with black buboes under his arms. The logistics of the third stage of labor are where most women in the 14th century lose their lives. The baby is out, but the placenta, the afterbirth, remains tethered inside. In a modern hospital, this is a routine 10-minute wait. In a medieval hovel, it is a race against a ticking clock of infection. The midwife uses a technique that would make a modern surgeon scream. She takes the umbilical cord, still attached to the organ inside you, and ties it firmly to your thigh. The belief is that if she doesn't, the placenta will crawl up into your chest and suffocate you. If it doesn't come out naturally, she begins the manual extraction. She reaches back into the raw, wounded interior of your uterus, her fingernails caked with the grime of the day, and begins to tear the tissue away from your uterine wall. This is the money shot of horror. Each tug sends a fresh wave of warm, dark blood onto the floor. To stop the flow, she uses styptics, a mixture of burnt leather ash, dried manure, and cobwebs gathered from the rafters. She presses this filth directly into your open wounds, believing the binding properties of the web will seal your veins. In reality, she is seeding your deep tissues with tetanus and streptococcus. You are slipping into a state of puerperal fever, but you mistake the rising heat in your blood for the warmth of the room. You look at your child and notice something terrifying. A small dark swelling on the infant's neck. The new threat is the efficiency of the plague. Because your immune system was suppressed during pregnancy, the Yersinia pestis bacteria doesn't just infect you, it colonizes you. The payoff is a tragedy of biology. The plague bacteria can pass through breast milk. As you pull the shivering, premature infant to your chest to comfort it, you are unwittingly delivering a lethal dose of the great mortality with every drop of colostrum. The room is growing darker, not because the sun is setting, but because your blood pressure is plummeting. The midwife, fearing the beetles cross on the door, gathers her bloodied tools and slips out through a back window, leaving you alone in the dark. No one tells you this part, but in 1348, surviving the birth was often just the prologue to a much lonelier death. The echoes of the midwife's retreating footsteps are replaced by a silence so heavy it feels physical. You are alone in the room of shadows, trapped behind a door marked with the cross of the pestilence. By the end of this part, you'll know why the first 24 hours were not for bonding, but for a desperate, ritualistic battle to keep the soul inside a cold body. The air in the hovel has turned freezing as the fire dies down, and you are too weak to crawl to the hearth. You are lying in a slurry of fluid and filth, your body shivering violently, a condition the 14th century calls the ague, but which we know as the onset of hypovolemic shock. The logistics of the first day revolve around the terror of the unbaptized. In 1348 France, a child who dies before the water touches its brow is condemned to limbo, a shadow realm forever apart from God. Because the priest is dead and the house is sealed, the responsibility falls to you, the mother, even as you drift in and out of consciousness. You reach for the basin of holy water the midwife left behind. It is cold and scummy, but you must perform a lay baptism. You faintly sprinkle the water over the infant's forehead, your voice a dry rasp in the dark. This isn't just a religious act, it is the only medical insurance you have. If the baby dies now, at least its soul is safe. A cold comfort when your own life is leaking out onto the straw. The money shot of this survival stage is the management of the lochia, the postnatal bleeding. Without pads or sterilized dressings, you are forced to use clouts. These are scraps of old, unwashed wool rags, often repurposed from the tunics of deceased relatives. You tuck them between your legs, but the wool is coarse and abrasive, reopening the tears from the midwife's rough handling. The rags quickly become sodden and heavy, a breeding ground for the bacteria already introduced by the cobweb styptic. You can smell it, a sickly, sweet rot that rises from the bedding. This is the scent of sepsis, the silent killer that claimed more medieval queens and peasants than the sword ever did. But a new threat is manifesting in your own chest. Your milk is coming in, but the transition is violent. Your breasts become engorged, hard as stones and streaked with red heat. In 1348, this is the milk fever. To treat it, the common wisdom is to apply a poultice of bread and milk, or worse, fried onions and cow dung to draw out the heat. You have none of these things. You are forced to endure the fire in the paps, while the infant, too weak to latch properly, begins to wail with a thin, bird-like hunger. The payoff is a brutal irony. The very mechanism designed to sustain life is now causing your temperature to spike to 104 degrees, 40 degrees Celsius, triggering hallucinations. You see the shadows on the wall move. You think you see the danse macabre, the skeletons of the plague victims, dancing in the corner of the room. You realize that the bleeding has stopped, but not because you are healing. It's because your heart is no longer strong enough to pump. What happens next is a gamble between the fever and the night. The hallucinations of the danse macabre fade into a much sharper, more physical agony. You aren't dead yet, but the new threat has arrived in the form of a heavy shadow against the moonlight. Someone is breaking the seal on your door. It isn't a savior, it's a barber surgeon, a man who treats the human body with the same finesse a butcher treats a carcass. By the end of this part, you'll know why his black leather bag was more feared than the plague itself. He has been summoned by the village elders because you are retaining the fruit, part of a second twin, or perhaps a mass of infected tissue is still trapped behind your cervix, and your body is beginning to turn putrid. The logistics of 14th century surgery are a descent into a mechanical nightmare. The barber surgeon doesn't believe in healing the womb. He believes in evacuating it. He spreads your legs across the edge of the straw pallet, his boots crunching on the dried blood. He pulls out a speculum matricis, a heavy iron device with a screw-turn mechanism. There is no oil for lubrication, only the sweat on his palms. As he cranks the iron open, you feel your internal tissues stretch to the point of tearing. The money shot of this horror is his primary tool, the crotchet. It is a long, sharp metal hook designed to snag and pull. He isn't looking for a living child anymore. He is looking to save the vessel by any means necessary. You feel the cold steel enter the most private, wounded part of your being. He works by feel, the hook scraping against the walls of your uterus, an organ already thinned and exhausted by labor. Every time he pulls, he brings out pieces of the afterbirth, or worse. The payoff is a level of trauma that modern medicine can barely categorize. Without anesthesia, your brain begins to disconnect from your body, a state of profound dissociation. You are watching a man fish for your life with a meat hook while the great mortality rages outside. But the worst part isn't the steel, it's the crotchet's failure. The barber surgeon realizes the tissue is too deep. He decides to use cautery to stop the massive internal hemorrhage he has just caused. He heats a small iron rod in the dying embers of your hearth until it glows a dull, angry red. You smell it before you feel it, the scent of your own searing flesh filling the tiny hovel. He presses the red-hot iron against the tears in your birth canal. The pain is so absolute, it transcends screaming. Your lungs simply lock. He packs the charred wound with a wad of tow, rough hemp fibers, and leaves you with a bowl of vinegar and a warning not to move. What he doesn't tell you is that the tow is infested with larvae, and the fire he used to save you has just opened the door for a gangrenous infection that will rot you from the inside out within 48 hours. The barber surgeon has disappeared back into the plague-choked night, leaving behind the smell of burnt meat and the heavy metallic silence of a tomb. You are currently in the final gamble of survival. By the end of this part, you'll understand how the 14th century's cure for a fever was actually a fast track to the grave. The new threat isn't the pain from the iron anymore. It's a terrifying, icy calm. Your skin has turned a ghostly, translucent white, a stark contrast to the angry red butterfly rash spreading across your cheeks. This is puerperal sepsis, childbed fever, and it is systematically shutting down your organs. The logistics of treating a dying mother are a carnival of medical errors. Because the village believes your fever is caused by putrid vapors trapped in your head, the few remaining women who haven't fled the plague return to perform a refrigeration. They don't give you water to drink. Instead, they take stones from the frozen stream outside and place them under your armpits and between your thighs. The shock of the cold against your septic 105-degree body sends your heart into a frantic, irregular gallop. To cleanse your blood, they force a funnel into your mouth and pour down a mixture of vinegar, crushed emeralds, if you are rich, but for you it's just crushed glass or sand, and theriac, a prehistoric sludge containing 64 ingredients, including aged snake meat and opium. The money shot of this final stage is the uterine suffocation theory. The midwife, who has crept back in seeing the surgeon depart, believes your womb is literally wandering upward toward your throat, drawn by the scent of the theriac. To pull it back down, she places foul-smelling substances, burnt feathers and dried animal dung, near your nose, while rubbing sweet oils on your thighs. You're trapped in a sensory hell. The stench of rot in your nostrils, the searing cold of the stones on your skin, and the internal fire of the infection. Your abdomen has begun to swell, hard and distended like a drum. The payoff is that the bacteria are producing gas inside your peritoneal cavity. You are literally inflating with the waste products of your own destruction. But the final pattern break is the most cruel. In a moment of terrifying clarity, the fever breaks for just a second. You look down and see the infant. It isn't crying anymore. Its skin is mottled with the tokens, the dark purple spots of the bubonic plague. The great mortality has won the race against the sepsis. You reach out a trembling, charred hand to touch the child, but you find you can no longer feel your fingers. The bridge to the end is now visible. You aren't just a mother anymore. You are a biological relic of a century that has no place for the weak. And as the final contraction, a spasm of the heart, not the womb, begins, you realize that the debt of Eve is finally being settled in full. The hammered cross on the door is the last thing the world gave you, a brand of the unwanted. By the end of this part, you'll see the haunting irony of how the 14th century finally cleansed the survivors. The hovel is silent now. The fire has long since turned to gray ash, and the freezing French winter has begun to reclaim the room. You are part of the empty cradle statistic, one of the millions of women whose names were never recorded, whose lives were measured only by the number of souls they attempted to bring into a dying world. The logistics of a medieval death were as ritualized as the birth. If you had survived, you would have faced the churching, a ceremony 40 days after birth where you would stand at the church door, veiled and carrying a candle, waiting to be purified from the filth of childbirth. You would have been forbidden from entering the sanctuary or even baking bread for your family until the priest deemed you clean. But for you, there is no candle, only the money shot of the plague era, the body hook. Because the house is marked, the bearers don't enter gently. They use long iron poles to drag the straw pallet, with you and the infant still on it, out into the mud of the street. There is no coffin, no shroud, and no individual prayer. The payoff of this journey is a staggering realization of human resilience. We often look back at the Middle Ages as a time of darkness and ignorance, but to survive pregnancy in 1348 required a bravery that borders on the supernatural. Every woman who went into labor was a soldier walking onto a battlefield with a 30% casualty rate. They faced the hooks of the surgeon, the filth of the hovel, and the terror of the Black Death with nothing but a lead amulet and a prayer. They did it because they had to, and because the miracle of life was the only thing capable of defying the great mortality that was thinning the world. As the sun rises over the Loire Valley, the village is quieter than it was 9 months ago. The fields are half-harvested, the wells are stagnant, and the survival rules have been rewritten by a flea and a bacterium. But somewhere in the next village, a woman is feeling the first quickening in her womb. She knows the risks. She has heard the screams. Yet she will sit on the same stained stool and face the same debt of Eve. The true irony of 14th century France is that despite the hunger, the filth, and the absolute lack of mercy, life found a way to bridge the gap to the modern world. You didn't survive, but the human race did, carried on the backs of women who faced the darkness and refused to let the fire go out. The story of the medieval mother is a brutal reminder that our modern comfort is a historical anomaly. We live in the first few seconds of human history, where a fever isn't a death sentence and a birth isn't a gamble with the grave. If this journey into the mud and blood of the 1300s changed the way you look at the past, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're stripping away the romantic veneer of history, one sensory hook at a time. Comment below, what's the one modern medical luxury you could never live without? Stay grounded, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next reconstruction.